let's get to him. Jeff Paterson, the man who takes no games off. Every game, post-game, during the playoffs, during the regular season. Jeff, remember when we had to do that Chicago game? That's what stands out for me this year. We don't take any games off.
I do recall that one, a few against Anaheim, and they haven't seen San Jose for a while. In fact, I think they were done with San Jose the game before Christmas, so maybe that was a good thing after watching the Sharks go through. I'm not even sure you can say go through the motions against Edmonton last night. That was, I don't know. I'm not even sure what that was, and somehow I was drawn to continue to watch it, but this isn't about the Oilers or about the Sharks. This is about the Vancouver Canucks. So you're right, game 81 of the season. Home finale, and what a season it's been at Rogers Arena, a chance to get 50 wins, and of course, a chance to lay claim to that Pacific Division title tonight.
We were just breaking down the playoff math, Jeff. Nashville, we've said, is the most likely opponent as well, and maybe the most favorable when you look at the alternatives. We're not wishing for a playoff opponent or anything like that. That's not what we're here to do. But how do you look at that in terms of the matchup for the Canucks? I know it's not locked yet, so it might be a little premature. But look, the next time we talk to you, Jeff, they're going to have already played, so we're not going to be able to preview a series. So just kind of looking at the matchup between the Canucks and the Nashville Predators, who it looks like is going to end up being the Canucks opponent.
Yeah, and yet you say that, Dave, and look, like that Demko hasn't played in 5 weeks. There's a possibility that he struggles tonight. The Calgary Flames have been scoring a bunch of goals. Like, it's not a guarantee. I figured LA was a match to knock off Minnesota. I just figured that both the Kings and the Golden Knights would win out, and you saw what happened to the Kings. We've seen some sort of screwy results here in the last 10 days or so. And I heard you talking about like St. Louis and Dallas. It's like that game, if the Canucks win tonight, that game. So as much as you'd like to say, yeah, they're locked into Nashville, they're not locked into Nashville at all. I mean, the Canucks can still finish in 3 different scenarios. They can win the conference, they can win the division, or they could be caught by the Edmonton Oilers at the wire. So I spent a lot of last night like trying to crunch numbers, and then at the end I was like, but we're really no further ahead. We've just scrubbed a bunch of games off the schedule. It is all going to get slotted in, but if they somehow lose in a shootout or overtime tonight, that much we know that they would then be in that matchup with the Nashville Predators that you wanted me to talk about. So I've taken a long and a roundabout way to get there. I see a lot of the people that suggest that's the matchup for the Vancouver Canucks, and I get it, but I also can't look past the fact that Nashville just won 18 games without dropping 1 in regulation. Like, that's pretty impressive stuff, and their top end is playing about as well as any top end in the National Hockey League. When you look at that line with Forsberg, and Ryan O'Reilly has sort of found the fountain of youth and been exactly what they hoped he was going to be in Nashville. When they signed him last year, I kind of rolled my eyes a little and thought, like, does he still have it? But, this is when you're going to see that he still has it. This is in playoff time. I guess Nyquist's been a nice pickup there, and obviously Roman Josi has just been lights out good, and then you got your UC Soro. So their top end is formidable. I still wonder a little bit about the depth below there and have some questions and concerns about Nashville, but Andrew Brunette's obviously done a really nice job, particularly in the second half, of just not losing focus and keeping the eyes on the prize, which was getting into the playoffs, first of all, and getting there playing their best hockey. So, there are no easy games. I mean, as cliche as that is, but particularly this year in the West, and the travel. And I know it's the same for both teams, but, if you're Nashville, you're probably looking at Dallas and thinking, like, man, that's an easy flight right there if we end up avoiding Vancouver, but maybe Nashville wants Vancouver. I know a week ago, the Canucks looked like that team that the other teams probably would want a piece of, and yet, an impressive comeback win against Vegas, and really impressive work in Edmonton the other night, following the blueprint that has led them to so much success. And I mentioned the chance to get to 50 wins, open the scoring, extend that lead, and then just go into hyper lockdown. Like that third period. I thought the third period against Vegas on home ice was impressive. And I know the others didn't have McDavid, but man, I liked so much of what I saw from the Vancouver Canucks in the late stages on Saturday night. And it was back-to-back and 3 and 4 for the Oilers. There were some factors, certainly, but that's not to take anything away from the Vancouver Canucks. And it's the way that they bought into Rick Tocchet's non-negotiables and his staples and the structure, and just essentially ground that victory across the finish line.
One of the other positives from that Edmonton game was seeing some secondary scoring in the form of Sam Lafferty and Pius Suter. How big of a factor do you think secondary scoring will be for Vancouver's playoff performance? Because it seems like they're a totally different team when they have that secondary support compared to when they don't.
Yeah, and look, I think I've been harder on the lack of secondary scoring over the second half of the season than some. And I've been into it on social media with people that are like, look at, Lafferty, Suter's in double digits, McKay's in. I'm like, yeah, but if you're watching since Christmas, like, all those goals, like, you can hold them up and they're there. You can't take them away. But most of the goals for those three guys came when they were playing with Elias Paterson in the first half of the season. At various times they were elevated, and that's where the bulk of their offenses come from. But since Christmas and really since the All-Star break, it has been a struggle. And for Pia Suter the other night, like, good for him. But then I say that, and I say, like, how hard is it to go to the net with your stick on the ice and good things happen? Like, it's crazy that playing with JT Miller and Brock Besser as much as he hasn't yielded a little bit more in the way of offense. But yeah, I mean, you'll find playoff games, Sarm, where top-end guys cancel out, and it's in the third period, and it's a tie game, and you're looking for a hero. And I look up and down that Canucks lineup, and before Saturday, I would have said, like, who's that guy? Like, do you believe that Sam Lafferty is going to come through in a tie game in the playoffs, or Pia Suter, or Ilya Mikheyev? And you can lump in Di Giuseppe or Bud Colson if he's playing, and those types of guys. One night, it was great the other night, and it was a night when the Canucks' best players weren't really going. They just weren't for whatever reason. But you saw the ability of guys lower in the lineup to make a difference and ultimately swing a result in the Canucks' favor. So I want to see more of that come playoff time. I'm not expecting a massive breakout at this stage, but it kind of feels to me like watching a lot of those guys that I just mentioned, they're so focused on defense, and you have to play defense under Rick Tocchet. I get that, but it almost feels like they've switched the offensive switch off, if you know what I mean. Like, they're not even thinking that they have to contribute. And if you're Pia Suter and you're playing, you may not be a top six guy in the perfect world, but given the way the Canucks deploy their lineup, he finds himself with Miller and Besser. Yeah, I think there should be a little bit of expectation on, the odd contribution here and there. So it's there. You've got guys that have a track record, but, ultimately it's one thing to say, hey, they've got depth scoring. It's another for that depth scoring to show up and be able to get the job done come playoff time.
In a similar vein there, Jeff, we were talking a lot about Elias Lindholm and what they were able to do as a third line with Joshua, Lindholm, and Garland completely shutting down the Leon Draisaitl line in that game on Saturday. Just focusing on Elias Lindholm a bit, because it feels like these are going to be the lines that we're going to see.
Yeah,
I hope for the remainder of the season and into the playoffs. It seems like this is what we're going to see. Just for Elias Lindholm, what has he meant to that line, do you think, and just to this Canucks lineup since returning?
Yeah, I mean, he's only been back for a couple of games, so I think he's still finding his top form and then trying to find a little chemistry with two guys that obviously ooze that chemistry in Joshua and Garland. But look, we saw what that third line did with Teddy Bluger, and I just think across the board, Elias Lindholm is a better player. He's got better offensive skills, if we can even see a glimpse of those, and I think he's got better defensive chops. And man, it was interesting listening to Rick Tocchet yesterday. Was asked about Elias Lindholm, and like his eyes lit up. And I get that the offensive side hasn't been there, and that his last 2 points, I think, have both come on empty net goals. Yes, again, for the Canucks to have an edge, you can say, hey, they've got Elias Lindholm on their third line, but he's going to have to find a way to produce. But on the defensive side, that's where Tocchet, you could just see the excitement when he started talking about Lindholm and all the things that he does. And obviously a right shot faceoff guy and a faceoff percentage that's off the charts good. That's great on the penalty kill. It's late game, you're trying to preserve leads, or if it's tie game, what a valuable tool to have there. But then Tocchet talked about just the IQ of some of the plays, and he said, like, these are things that, the average fan probably isn't glomming onto, but, the decisions he makes, when to dive in, when not to, when to back off. And again, just sort of having that hockey sense that allows him to make the right decision in real time in high leverage moments. And I do think that is sort of an underappreciated part of his game. Now, you can say, hey, they traded a big package of facets to get a guy that has great hockey IQ. Fair enough. I think that they expected more from Lindholm, just in his overall performance and his ability to contribute. But if the offense hasn't been there, the defense has been really since day one, and through a wrist injury. So to have him back, to have him healthy, and yeah, I mean, take on that assignment the other night against Leon Draisaitl and absolutely win his battles and then contribute to an empty netter. A big step forward. He should be fired up as much as he gets fired up, because he's a pretty even keel and level-headed guy, but he's got his former team here tonight in the Calgary Flames. And then, the payoff ultimately is the playoffs, right? Like that's where the trade's going to be judged. It's not so much what he did or didn't do in these regular season games, but the measure of that trade and the measure of the player is going to come here starting next week against whomever they draw as a first-round opponent.
2-3 weeks ago, a lot of us were worried about Vancouver's power play. Recently, they bounced back 7 power play goals in their last 7 games. What's your confidence level in Vancouver's power play right now? Do you think they fixed their woes?
Can't say that they fixed it, Harm. That first power play the other night in Edmonton, and it wasn't a full power play because there was some overlap, but they couldn't even gain the zone. Like they never set up once. Barely had the puck on the power play in the Edmonton zone, but certainly they didn't get a chance to set up. Second power play later in the game, that's the power play that I want to see. They were zipping it around. They were creating looks. They were, identifying open guys and getting the puck to them, got some shots, got some chances. So it's still sort of blowing hot and cold for me, but I do think given where it was even 10 days ago, there has been some proof in this pudding that, it's coming back and it can be a difference maker and it can swing games in their favor. So I don't need them to light up the Flames on the power play or even the Jets on Thursday, but I do want to see continued steps of progression here, getting the reps where the power play at least looks dangerous. And you're not always going to score. I mean, the best power play is 30%. So even if it's a 25% power play, you're failing 3 times for every goal that you score. But there are points in games where the power play has to come through. And I think that's been an issue certainly since the All-Star break. The other thing is sometimes it's not going to score, but does it look good? Can it generate pressure and swing momentum in your favor? And can you follow it up with another shift or two? Like I do think that power plays, even if they don't yield a goal, can be turning points in a hockey game. And I think that, the second power play against Edmonton the other night, it just looked so much better, so much more confident than even the first one. So it is funny within a game, from power play to power play, there is still this gap of this team that's fighting it, this team that looks like it's not that confident. And then, a handful of minutes later, another period, all of a sudden these guys are whipping it around like they did early in the season. So component parts are there without a doubt. And, tight games again, like there are going to be crunch times in playoff hockey where they absolutely need a power play goal. And, I wish I could sit here and tell you absolutely, 100% confident in them. Can't say that, but I did see some signs of life and have over the last couple of weeks at least.
Jeff, Andrei Kuzmenko shooting at like 26% again. So obviously people are starting to talk about him and, how could they have ever traded this guy? Andrei Kuzmenko coming back to Rogers Arena tonight. I don't even know what my question really is. I've seen so many people, Jeff, looking at this trade now and saying, well, Kuzmenko's scoring, Lindholm's not. Clearly, honestly, like the easiest way for me to put it is it feels like both fan bases are like coping with the trade. Like, well, Canucks fans like, well, he's so good defensively.
I'll help you out here, Dave. You don't even need a question because I came prepared for a Kuzmenko discussion at the very least. So I think he undersold him because in April, his shooting percentage is at 38%. He scored 7 goals on 19 shots here this month. He had the hat trick the other night against the Ducks. He followed it up with 2 points the other night against the Coyotes. Had somebody on social say, maybe you want to look at who he scored his goals against as a Calgary Flame. 7 of his 14 goals with the Flames have come against the Sharks or the Ducks. So that got me thinking because his last goal as a Canuck, he scored twice in a 7-4 win just before Christmas against San Jose. And I was like, wow, 7 of 14 as a Flame against those two teams. So he had 3 of 8 as a Canuck. You do the math, 10 of his 22 goals this year have come against those two brutal California teams. So context matters here. He's fun. He was a great guy to deal with. But, one thing to absolutely light up the Sharks and the Ducks repeatedly. It's another to come through in crunch time. And it's just been a weird year for him and obviously throwing a trade in there as well. But, I mean, he's settled in on a line right now that's feeling. Nazem Kadri's the 3rd star of the week of the National Hockey League, coming in with back-to-back 3-point performances. So, if you're the Vancouver Canucks, like there is a danger factor, right? Like these guys are loose. They got nothing to play for other than padding their own stats. And Kadri's feeling it right now. And Kuzmenko's a finisher. So, that's where I say the Flames can be a dangerous team in that regard if the Canucks aren't completely locked in the task at hand. But, in terms of grading this trade, the Canucks got out from under the final year of the contract that they themselves signed Kuzmenko to prematurely. So it's hard to a big pat on the back for getting off a bad contract that you handed out sooner than you should have. But the fact of the matter is that they did create some cap flexibility that they needed. And again, I'm not here to judge the trade now because Kuzmenko's not going to the playoffs and Elias Lindholm is, and we'll see what kind of factor he can be for the Vancouver Canucks. But wouldn't it be something if the Canucks want the Nashville Predators and ultimately it's an overtime or a shootout loss that yields that matchup, tie, go to OT, and then Kuzmenko is the guy that sets the Canucks in their playoff slot here by scoring the overtime winner tonight.
Oh, poetry in motion right there, Jeff. And you'll be there to break it all down live on the Rink-Wide Vancouver YouTube channel. It'll be there post-game. Going to be a good time, Jeff. I'll see you at the game tonight.
I look forward to that. And yeah, Irfan Gaffar joining me in studio, and we'll break it all down. We'll have the team awards. Obviously, we'll see if we know about the playoff slot. If not, we'll certainly update the playoff standings at the very least because Vegas is playing tonight as well. So there's some action on the out-of-town scoreboard to keep an eye on. So lots going on here in the final week of the regular season, and we'll cover it all off tonight on Rink-Wide Vancouver.
Jeff, great stuff as always. Thanks so much for joining us.
Okay, guys, thanks.
Canucks Conversation is live Monday through Friday, every weekday at 2 p.m. over on the CanucksArmy YouTube channel. Make sure you like, subscribe, and interact in the YouTube live chat every day with us, folks.